So while that paint is curing for a few days on that crown, I want to just finish up a few last little details in here, because why not? So we have a couple moldings still to install. We have this guy. This is the shoe molding that'll go and transition our baseboard to our floor, give us a nice visual line down there. And then we also have this 1/2-inch cove molding, which goes underneath the sill and transitions from the sill to the paneling, covering any gap in here and just providing a little transition up in there. So I'm going to start with this cove molding. I got this big piece to go in first. It's going right into the corner, and then we'll put a splice down here somewhere. If you can go down there. Not that far, that's too far. I'm closer. That's good. Pick it up, it goes under here. Okay. And now here's where things get interesting. I have a little jog in here because this paneling is thinner than this piece. So I have a little tiny sliver to get that situated, to get that jog on there. I have another short piece coming this way, and then it will return back into the wall. So we have 3 little tiny pieces to go right here. Okay, there's the first little piece. That's the front piece, so this one gets a little jog. It's gonna get like a 1/8 inch thick piece, and this one gets returned back to the wall. Okay, so this side, pretty similar situation. It's a little bit different. So we have a little jog again, but this piece is 4 inches wide, and we're returning into the wall. So we're gonna have a longer return, a longer transverse piece, and we'll still have the same little tiny piece to get that jog in there. And here is that one. Short little piece, a little bit longer return, much longer transverse. Yeah, that takes care of all that cove molding around the room. So I need to do the shoe molding, but I also kind of forgot that I have all of these pieces here to reinstall. These are all of the window screen trim pieces that I painted. There's 4 of them here, so I'm just gonna throw these in to the windows real quick, and then I'll start running the shoe molding around the room. Okay, so we got shoe mold at least out here. I got a few small pieces still to go, but at least things are just about there, and I am ready to move into a little bit of crown. So I guess the strategy I have here is that the two short ends, those will be full pieces, end to end, and then these longer runs here will be two pieces. So I'll have a cope end into the corner, a scarf joint, and then the other side will be coped into that side. So I want to start with these short ends first. And something to think about with these short ends is that my ceiling joists are running this way. So as I do my long ones, I have places to attach the crown to the ceiling, but on these short walls, if I just put these up here, I can attach the bottom to the wall, but there's nowhere to attach the top to into the ceiling. I'd just be hitting air. If I was, I had planned ahead for this, I would have put some blocking in the ceiling when we were framing, but there were a lot of other little details in my mind at that point. So I have made up some blocking, and this is gonna go up onto the wall and give me a little place here to attach the top of the crown to and secure it. So I made this in the shop. The angle on the crown is a little over 45 degrees. So I couldn't just set the angle of my saw, my table saw to 45 and go. It actually needs to be steeper. I think it's more like 47 or 48 or something like that. So to get to that angle, I attached a shim to my table, and that allowed me to get that extra little bit of the angle in there, and I could run my rip for my piece. And then the other part of this prep cut was to cut up the final length. So I set the pieces on the table saw table and used a piece of the band board to establish the thickness that I needed this thing to be off the wall, and made a rip to the width that I needed right at that point. And that gave me all the stock that I should need. So I can take my long piece here and chop it up into individual pieces and put these at the stud locations, and that'll give me something to attach the crown to. Okay, so that one is all prepped, so we should be able to cut and install this first piece. It should be pretty easy because it just runs straight in. 117 and 1/16. Okay. I'm gonna go a little conservative on the nails for now. Just me second guessing myself. That's how it always goes. But that makes a huge difference. Look at that. This is gonna look crazy. Okay. Same thing on this side. And then we start doing the fun stuff. Okay, now with that in there and that one in there, now I can start installing this piece up here. I'm starting with the less visible side just in case. So I'm going to put a full piece, I'll cope it into the corner, and then wherever it ends up, I'll put a splice for the next piece, and it'll be the same thing on this end. It'll be coped into the corner, and then I'll match up with the splice wherever that ends up being, probably over there somewhere. So there are two ways to cut crown. You can do it like this. This is called the nested position. So you can see that the molding itself is held into the saw just like it would be on the wall. The bottom of the saw, the base of the saw is the ceiling, and then the wings or the fence here is the wall. So that allows you to at least visually see, where your cuts are, and you have all your same miter angles. The other way to cut it would be on the flat. This way is only going to work for certain spring angles. So on the saw, you'll see a indicator here for 31.6. That's going to be your miter angle. And then on the bevel, it's going to be like 33.9. Mine isn't actually marked, but it'll be something like that. And if you make that cut, that's going to give you a 45 for like an inside or outside corner. The last time I did crown, I used this method where I did on the flat, and I didn't really like it that much. If everything is like perfect, it's not a problem. But if you're trying to do like an outside miter on a corner that's not quite 90, it's kind of hard to like tweak and adjust your angles to actually get it to be fitting well. And then like mentally, I just couldn't really get there. I had a hard time visualizing this. So this time I'm doing the nested position. And you can do, you can make jigs and like fixtures and things. This saw has these little like wing things, and normally you can have like a spoil board that goes in the middle here, but I'm only cutting a few pieces, so I don't really care. So first off is going to be the cope. That starts with the inside miter. So there's my cut position. Inside miter, just like it would be for any other trim I'd be coping on the floor already. So we'll start here, and then we'll make our cope. Take a look. Oh yeah, that's good. Okay, so let's cut the scarf on the other end, and then this can go in. All right, good morning, everyone. We're gonna get started here with those last remaining fill piece things. So I think those are, I don't know, 6.5, 7 feet long. First thing on those is gonna be to do the cope into the corner, and then we'll cut the, I don't know, splice thing, scarf joint, and I'll sneak up on the scarf joint as I go. So I'm gonna get some pieces and start coping. So as far as setup goes on this scarf joint, I have a couple of dominoes in here which help to align the profiles so they're not like slipping past one another, and that'll make blending them together a little bit easier. I also have attached one of my blocks back here. That's going to give me some extra support across the whole joint. And there is some construction adhesive behind there to further help reinforce this connection, keep it from moving over time and coming apart. Oh, come on. All right, let me get that. Get some putty in there and get that blended out. Make it look like it's not even there. Okay, that is it for the crown in here. At least I have one more thing to install in here, and then we'll work out of this room a little bit. So I think the last thing for this room is just this shoe mold down here. I just want to show the detail I'm doing on here. Since my column isn't quite wide enough to capture both the baseboard and the shoe mold, I just made a little return and a little lap on there so that the shoe mold kind of laps over the corner of that post. I think it's kind of a fun look. So the return is just notched a little bit to go around the post, and it just kind of fits in there like that. This has a little bit of coverage onto the column, which is kind of nice. Kind of a fun detail. And I'm just getting rid of some leftovers. So I got this short piece, this slightly longer short piece, and I'll just cut something to go in the middle. Okay, that is the sunroom fully installed as far as trim goes. The last thing I gotta do before I can prep and paint everything from here forward is to finish up this east wall of the breakfast nook. So I have a piece of crown that just goes on the top there that just runs end to end, just like the end pieces. And then I have this little area here, which would be above the breakfast bench. Is two pieces of V paneling and a rail that comes in at the height of the bench. So I'm going to cut and install this crown first because it should be easy and quick. Okay, let's take care of the three pieces that go here, that rail, and the two pieces of V-board. So here's a cross section of the breakfast bench, which should be going there, and you can see that the top of the bench aligns with this rail which has to go on here. So the bottom of this rail needs to be 40 inches off the floor. That's those two distances here. And what I did was actually make my rail over width. So I have 4 inches to show, and then part of it will be buried behind the future ledge countertop thing, which is going to go in here. So actually I want 44 inches to the top edge of this piece. So that is way down here. So that's the top edge of that rail. And I wanted to know that because we're going to cut the paneling first, put it in, and then we'll butt that rail up into it all. So my paneling needs to be 40 3/4 long. That's these guys right here. So these panels are just double grooved, and this is just some extra stuff I had when I made the paneling for the actual sunroom. So I have a spline which will join together. And if I bottom it out all the way, it should leave me with my expansion gap looking thing that I want to have. Come on. There. So there's our actual panel, kind of ready to go. Now for final width, I made these over width. The space is 10 3/4 and 10.5 up top. So I'll make the first one parallel, and then I will rip a taper on the other one to make it the right size to go in. Now for the rail, this is going to be flush like everything else, and I didn't really think about this or plan for this before. If I had, I would have put dominoes into this piece so they're already here. I didn't do that, so I can't do that now. So I have a slot cutter on the router, and we'll cut a slot into here and into this piece, and we'll essentially just spline them together. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and then this piece will be ready to go on with the panels and everything. Okay, I just finished prepping these. Let's see how these fit. Yeah. Press fit. Okay. Let's install these. I clipped this back corner here so I could swing it in. There we go. So let's install this piece and we're done. And I'm gonna glue this to the drywall as well, since the only place I have to anchor it is the stud back here along the back edge. So just be a little extra. Okay, there is everything installed and cleaned up a little bit. There is everything. This looks pretty ridiculous. And just, it's weird seeing it all actually up there and in person. It is a really nice amount of detail. A lot of detail, but really nice. So now we can finally compare that view to the elevation view that we've been looking at for this whole time. It's very weird seeing this in real life. It's some kind of different, that's for sure. So next thing for this is going to be all paint prep. I'll share a bit about that, and then we'll prep and paint everything in place. Should be fun. Not really, but it'll be nice when it's done. So we staged some furniture in here to get a feel for the overall layout. We just had Thanksgiving, and as we kind of already knew, this is a pretty amazing space, and actually having the trim installed just makes it even more elevated, I guess. What really surprised me like so far is that the casings on the windows make the casings almost disappear and make the windows look more like framed pictures, I guess. And they just kind of fade to the background, allowing you to see the view. And it almost feels like an artistic mural surround when you're in here. So it's nice to kind of like, it's not done, but like you can see what it's going to be finally, like in person, and get a real feel for it. So I have a lot of paint prep to do, and I wanted to just cover a little bit about the process because I got a lot of questions about all the prep stuff that I'm doing. I'm not a painter. I'm just a guy that likes things to be like, you know, real nice. So I'm gonna run through things. First off is going to be filler. So I've done a lot of this ahead of time, which is nice. The one thing I've carried over from my furniture making, and that is like finish prepping as you go, so that when you're ready to get into finish, you don't have like this huge mountain of monotonous finish prep to do. You could just jump into, you know, just a little bit of final touch-ups and then kind of get into finishing. Just makes it a lot less of like a burden to kind of go through everything, you know, all at once like that. So this is the filler product that I'll use. This is going to be on the, obviously, the nail holes and the screw holes. Most of the time, one coat with this and then a sand is good enough, but I will check and make sure that the holes are filled completely without any little dips. This stuff doesn't really shrink like really at all. I don't really notice a whole lot of shrinking with this. What happens sometimes is if the hole isn't like perfect and crisp, you can get some wood fibers that kind of get in the way of the filler, completely filling the whole area. One of the things I did for most of the screw holes was counterbore them before putting the screws in with a brad point bit. That creates a much cleaner hole and makes it a lot easier to fill without any kind of weird frayed fibers to kind of worry about. The other areas for the filler is going to be anything that comes into flush. So it doesn't really matter if it actually is flush or it looks perfect. If you were doing multiple coats of paint, you know, standing between, you have some touch-up time to go, then it wouldn't be as big of a deal. But I am trying to get this all prepped so I can do one quick last top coat and be done. So even though something that is flush may look flush and perfect, any little like chip or slight micro gap between the two pieces, that's going to actually show through that paint. So in this room, the areas that are going to be flush are going to be the band boards or the casings. Those are kind of the main primary ones you've seen. We also have the archway, the column and beam details. Those three pieces that make those kind of U-wraps all need filler along those seams. The edges I broke a little bit as you know I'm painting, as I'm prepping before I did the install. So there is a little bit of a divot, even though they look flush, that the filler will fill and make those actually look seamless after they're painted. And then of course we have areas where we are splicing pieces together. That's gonna be like the crown molding and the shoe molding and on the baseboards, which I already did ahead of time. Lastly is going to be large gaps in inside corners. I will pre-fill with the filler, and that'll just give some backing for the caulking, which we will talk about in a second. After all that filler is done is sanding. All the flat surfaces have already been pre-sanded before I brought them in here. They all got a sanding with 400 grit to kind of prep them, but I will go over everything again lightly just to knock off any extra filler from the screw holes and just kind of make sure every surface is just kind of ready to go for paint after this. Okay, caulking. This is, there's a lot of caulking. So I will caulk every single inside corner seam. It doesn't matter how tight that seam is or looks or whatever. Any inside corner gets a little bit of caulking. That's going to obviously fill any gaps that might be in that seam, but it's also going to give a little bit of a radius for the paint to take and give a little bit of flexibility underneath the paint. So if the two pieces move around a little bit, they can do that without the paint cracking, at least, in theory. Okay, all the surface prep and surrounding prep is just about done. I am going to get started here on the door. So the general, I guess, strategy today is going to be kind of revolving around the door. So I'm going to pull the door out first, get it, finish getting it masked off, and then I will prime the door and the remaining of the door jamb, because that door has to go back in, so I want to get that drying as quickly as possible. So while the primer on the door is drying, I can go around and do all my little spot priming as well, prime the jamb, get everything all ready to go for top coat. And then the door will be the first thing that I top coat, and then I will move it out of this room so it can actually start curing, so I can get that thing dry enough to reinstall by this evening. Top coat is the same stuff that I applied already one coat of to all the parts. That is the conversion varnish. It's a 2-part paint, so it needs to be catalyzed. I'm going to catalyze a full gallon today, and we'll see how far that takes me. A little differently also today is I have the pressure pot set up for the sprayer, so that gives me a couple of benefits, or actually 3 benefits, I think. First off, I can put more into the gun at once, so I don't have to refill as often. The cup on the gun is 1 quart, and the pressure pot is 2 quarts, so I can hold twice as much material between refills, which is nice. The other really nice benefit is it takes the weight of the product off my wrist. It's not on the gun anymore, so that makes it a lot easier to hold and maneuver the gun for long periods of time, which is super duper nice. And then the other benefit is that with the cup completely off the gun, I can spray at any angle because there's no pickup or gravity feed or anything like that on the gun itself. I can spray upside down, which is going to be super nice when I get down to the floor. One of the harder parts about spraying the baseboard in the great room was spraying that low. The gun and the cup got in the way. I couldn't get the gun, close enough to the floor and be nice and parallel to the face of the baseboard. So I had to do some kind of weird angles to try and get that. And just holding the gun upside down and spraying the baseboard is going to be so much easier. So that's the flow for today. And then we're done.
On the inside of these two walls and the outside, it's all trim. But there's nothing you'll see from this point all the way around to here on the inside and outside will be all trim. So layout's fairly important, so we keep all of these things symmetrical. On this one, there's no, like, oh, if the window's a ½ inch to one side or the other, it doesn't really matter. This one, it really matters because we got 5 windows that are all evenly spaced and meet wall to wall. So it does make a difference. So we did like those there, if it was a ½ inch one way or another, it doesn't make any difference.
Right. You're never going to tell.
You never tell.
Yeah.
This one, you will tell.
So there is the sunroom fully trimmed out and basically complete at this point, and we absolutely love it. There is so much detail here in the walls and in the trim, but at the same time, that detail is able to fade and fall to the background and really bring your eye to the glass, which is the actual focal point of this room, windows. The sunroom was the one thing that Lindsay absolutely wanted as part of an addition or a renovation to the home, some sort of room off of the kitchen for sitting and kind of hanging out. And if you've been following the whole time, the sunroom has evolved through like the whole early design process of what it was going to be. Originally, this was going to be a totally separate room, a 3-season porch essentially, that was off of the main house. The original exterior wall would still be in place, and this would be its own separate space, completely separate from everything else. We added, the breakfast nook and the pantry, and that allowed us to take us to the point of having the space be a little more unified and be part of the actual kitchen and the other space in here. I showed on camera, the time and effort that Donovan went into, laying us out and planning for the future, but there was a lot more off camera of actually making sure that the framing was correct and that everything made sense so that when it came to do all of this, it actually works. So this is like a pretty big accomplishment, milestone or whatever of this project, and this one is checked off the list, and we'll get back to working on the kitchen next time. So thank you as always for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments on the home renovation, remodel edition thing, whatever we're calling it, please feel free to leave a comment. As always, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And until next time, happy woodworking. It's all trim and whatnot.